Welcome back. Today I'm going to try to solve some puzzles on chess.com. I'm just going to do as many as I can in the time that I have allotted. Last time I made it over 1,500. I'd like to get over 1,600 this time, but there's no guarantee. I will follow my checklist. We check for checks, and then we evaluate any checks, then we check captures, threats, and so on. Here I do have several checks, 3 that I can see immediately. I have this rook check, which doesn't look great because they would just take it. And my opponent is threatening checkmate right now, so I have to be careful. The other checks that I have are here, queen to d3. Again, I'm practicing saying the names of the squares instead of saying there and here and this and that. I also have queen to d1 check. Both of those, no, sorry, I was going to say both of those are safe, but one of them is not. Their queen can capture my queen on d3, so I don't know that that's any good. Right? I don't think I would have a follow-up. If my opponent took there on d3, then I've just lost a queen. And again, here we just lose a rook, and then I still have to deal with the checkmate threat. So what about queen to d1? That's the only other check remaining. In that case, my opponent only has 1 legal move. No, my opponent has 2 legal moves. They could block with the knight. But if they block with the knight, I would take it, and that would be mate. So I don't think they'll block with the knight. Their other legal move is to move the king up to f2, in which case I could follow with my queen because it would be defended by my rook. So queen to e2 check would leave them. They can't come up here because of the pawn, so the king would have to go back to g1. I might be making this more complicated than it is. Hold on. If I check here, the king, they won't block with the knight because we've already said that's mate. So if the king comes up, I think I bring the rook down to e2 and that's mate. I think this is a mate in 2 puzzle. Let's find out. Okay, and my earlier idea was okay, I guess, but I think they could have just gotten away and I didn't have a follow-up. I couldn't see a good follow-up to that. I guess I could have checked again here, but it looks like bringing the rook to e2 is mate. Okay, again, because the pawn guards g3. And again, they have removed the ability to edit the themes here, which I don't know if that's happened to everybody. Has that happened to everybody, or is it just me that can't edit the themes anymore? Because there's definitely themes that are wrong. Like this one says bishop pair. Do you see any bishops or any pairs of bishops here on, in this puzzle? No, but I can't thumbs down that anymore. So that seems like a huge, either a bug or bad design, one of the two. I'm going to try not to let it bother me, but I do get distracted by stuff like that. When things change on the site, I wonder why. And in this case, it seems like a really bad decision because they're left with a bunch of incorrect themes. Moving on, next puzzle. Okay, they've captured something here. I'm not sure what it was. I guess I could take back. Let's stick with the checklist. Let's start with checks. I do have a check, and I think that's my only check. Bishop to e6. That leaves their king 2 legal moves. They could go left or right to h8 or f8. I don't guess it matters. They could also block with the knight, and then I would take the rook. I'm guessing because if I take the rook first, which I believe is no, it's not my only capture. Sorry. I have a capture here. Sorry, I had my thoughts running in about 4 different directions there, but obviously the first thing that I saw was taking the rook, and I decided to look for checks. I think the problem with not checking first is that if I take their rook, they just take my bishop, right? So if I check first, that protects the bishop and the pawn, and then I take their rook, and I'm a piece ahead. I mean, I'm a piece ahead right now, but if I take here and they take here, I don't know which one they would take with. I'm guessing the rook. I don't know, though. They also have an in-between move here. Right? If I took here first, they could take my knight with check. I'd have to break open my king, and then they could take the bishop, and we would each be left with a rook. But if I check first, and they get out of check one way or the other, and then I take the rook, then I have an extra piece. And if they trade this off, I think I'll be fine. Okay, I guess it could be taking the knight, but if I take the knight, well, that's tough. No, I'm going to take the rook because I want a rook left, I think. Oh, they did take the knight. Well, nothing else makes sense here other than to take it. Okay. I thought about taking the knight first, but I'm curious as to what and this one doesn't have a theme at all. Sorry. I'm curious as to what the downside would have been of taking the knight first. Let me go to the analysis board real quick. Does that fit? Okay. It's a little off, but it fits. All right. So we went here. I mean, they went there, and then I did this. That was correct. And when they got out of check, my opponent would have had a lead if I had taken the knight first, and that's because they take the rook, and when I take back, they take here, and now look what I've got left. Not enough. That's why. Okay. All right, next puzzle. Okay, we have an endgame puzzle. All right, I am playing with the black pieces. My king is vulnerable here, but I'm not in danger of being mated because it can get away. I only have 2 pawns and a rook, so those are the choices. And I only have 1 check in this position, which is here. I don't think that's my best plan, is it? I'm not certain, but I assume if I checked there, they would capture with the rook, and then I would take with the pawn. Then I assume they would take with the king, simultaneously getting out of the way of their own pawn. Then it would be my turn, so I would shoot my h-pawn forward, they would shoot their a-pawn forward. And I would go, and then they would go, and I would go, and I would beat them to promotion, right? But when I promoted, I'd be guarding the promotion square. I was going to say when they promoted, I would be in check, but maybe not, because I would beat them to promotion. Let's see what the other options are. Other options are taking the pawn. That's a capture. In that case, again, I don't know, but they might just take, and then if I took, they took, and then we'd have the same thing, wouldn't we? But if I take here, they don't have to take. They could just get in front of it. But if I take here, they pretty much have to take. It seems like I figured this out, but I just want to be sure, because they don't have to take, right? But if they just move out of check, which those are the other 2 options besides capturing, then I would capture their rook on b7. And then they can't get that pawn promoted because I can stop it. All right, I'm not seeing anything else that works better. For example, if I push past with the pawn, I think they can just go after it this way, meanwhile getting out of the way of their own pawn. Of course, then that would be a check, but then they could just go toward the pawn and they'd be ready to take it, I think. So yeah, I think it has to be the check. If it's not, I'll find out why. Okay, then I take. And they take, and then I advance my pawn. Oh, they moved their king instead of their pawn. That seems like a mistake because they're not in the square of the pawn. You've heard of this square, right? If it was their turn right now, they could catch it, but it's not their turn, so it doesn't make sense. They can't actually catch the pawn, so I don't know why they didn't push theirs. Maybe it didn't matter. Okay, and this one, the theme is passed pawns. Well, I've got a ways to go if I want to break 1600 in this video. Next. Well, again, let's look for checks. I do see a discovered attack on their queen if there were a way to check with this knight, but I don't see a way to check with the knight, and my queen's undefended, so then it would have to be a knight check. But I do have checks, or at least one. This is a check, and then I would still have the discovered attack on the queen, and from here my queen would be defended. Let's see. I'm pretty sure, because they don't have anything guarding this square, right? Their bishop can't get there, but I do need to do something because of where their bishop is. They're threatening a checkmate here. Or nah, it's not quite checkmate because I could move, but it's close. Oh, and their rook's guarding this square. Okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is my only check in the position, so it should have been the first move that I found. That only leaves their king 2 legal moves. I guess they could block with the rook, but if they move out of check with their king, they move to g7, I have this check, and then I win their queen. And if they move to the back, I have this check here on g6 and still win their queen. Okay, so the question is, if I check on e4 and they block with the rook, couldn't I just take it? And then they could take my queen, but I would take back. Then they would take my knight, and I would have gone up in exchange. Is that the best that I have? Let's see. What if, okay, that seems to be their best defense then, is blocking with the rook. Because that way they don't just lose a queen, that way they trade queens. Because if they move out of check with the king, they just lose their queen. They lose a queen for a knight, but here there would be a queen trade if they block with the rook. Would I have anything else at that point? I don't see anything else at that point other than, again, just taking the rook, then doing the queen trade and losing a knight. But if they took that knight with the pawn after the queen trade, then I would have this check and win their bishop. I don't know, but I'm going to try this check. They moved out, so it kind of made it a moot point. All right, well then I'll check with the knight and win their queen. Okay, well I'm curious. Let's go. If they had played it the other way, which I'm pretty sure was their best move, after they took that knight and I check here, it's actually even. It's very close to even whether they block with the rook. I thought this would have been better for them. What would I have done here? See, I would have messed up. I only have one move here. The puzzle should have gone that way. It would have been much more difficult for the puzzle solver. Because then my only move is rook to c7, and I wouldn't have found that. I would have played this, which would have given my opponent an advantage because of trading here, and they would have taken the knight with the queen to avoid this check and fork. I mean, with the king? Did I say queen? And now look what I have. Nothing. Yeah, they definitely should have blocked with the rook right here, because moving back made it obvious. That was like the first thing that I saw here. Okay. Discovered attack? Yeah, that's what I saw. All right, next puzzle. Well, as always, let's look for checks. The only checks I see are this one, which loses a queen pretty badly, or these two with the knight. I think if I check on h3, I think the king could just come forward. And if I check on f3, I think they could just take it with the knight or the queen. If they took with the queen, then I would get their knight too, but then that's just an even trade. So it may not be a check. It may be... Sorry, my words weren't coming out very well, but I think it might just be taking their knight first. Right? Because it's a free piece. Assuming they take back with the queen, then I get the fork here and win their queen. I think it's that. I'm basically getting I'm getting the knight for free because they don't have to take my queen at that point. But if they do, then I get their queen back and I'm up a piece. Because my three checks that I saw, none of them work out. None of them have a follow-up that I can see. And the only captures I have are that knight, this pawn, and that pawn. Well, I guess this pawn. I could just get that pawn for free right now, but that doesn't seem great. So I'm going to take their knight. Oh, it was that. Okay, then it's this and picking up the queen. All right. Oh, and I get 8 points this time. Fork double attack. Next puzzle. I am playing with the black pieces. All right. Well, the two checks that I have don't look good. Both of those, I think, just lose the queen, although this one is another fork double attack and I would win their queen. So it's probably that, isn't it? Because if I check here and they take, then I'm just done. But if I check here, they're forced to take back, and then I check them and win their queen. Let's do that. All right, check and queen. And I'm left with a knight and a big pawn majority over here on the queen side. Oh, and I got 15 points for that. You saw how the theme here is doubled rook? I dare anyone to try to point out the doubled rook in that puzzle. Where is it? There was only one rook in the puzzle. And you can't double a single rook. Yeah, that's why they should have the thumbs down here so we can get rid of these bad themes. All right, next. Again, look for checks first. I have a check here and I have a check here. I assume one of those is better. Oh, it's this one. And the reason that one's better is because that knight is what's preventing me from checkmating. So if I check here, they have two choices, three choices. They can get out of check, in which case this is mate, or they can take with the pawn, in which case this is mate, queen to h2, or they can take with the bishop, in which case queen to h2 is mate. So my guess is, let's see, the only way they could stop the mate, I think, is to play this pawn, but they can't do that while they're in check. If I take the bishop, the knight is still guarding h2. So let's go here, and then mate. Okay, good. No theme on that puzzle, even though it's made in two. And yeah, I think I decided to point out any time that the themes are missing or incorrect because they no longer gave me the choice to correct them. That's because I'm passive aggressive like that. And yes, I feel bad about that, but it's also fun sometimes. Next puzzle. I was only halfway joking about that. Let's see, checks. We will start with checks. I have two checks here. The first one, knight to e7, forces their king to move over. I think that would be their only move. But with knight to f6, they have choices. They could capture it, or they could move. Would either of those be good? I also have a fork here, which is probably what I would be tempted to play in a game. Oh, and I have a free bishop. Wait, I'm playing with the white pieces, right? Oh, wow. Okay, but I was looking for checks first, and that's what led me to over here, because I was already looking at the knight, which are my only two checks. Well, let's see, do I have a follow-up if they move over? I mean, I kind of do, because that's a check also, but then they could just take that, and then I have mate. They would have to block with the bishop. Okay, so it's probably that then. Because this is probably what most people would see first, I think. And of course, I saw it last. But yeah, they only have one legal move. It's moving over. I have check. They only have one legal move, which is to capture. And then I have checkmate with my rook on h1 because my knight would be guarding both of those squares. They would have to block with the bishop and I would take it. Okay, let's try that. And then sack the rook. Come check here and mate. Nice. And I got it fast enough to be plus 11. No theme listed here, and I can't add one because that feature is missing now. Oh wow, I've got 33 points to go if I want to hit 1600 today, and I only have so many minutes left. Next puzzle. Let's start with checks. That's a check, but I assume they would take it, and then if they did take it, I don't have any more checks. Okay, I mean, again, assuming they would take it, that's not my only check. I have this check with my queen and this one. But either one of those, I'm pretty sure they would just take back with their king, and I don't have a good follow-up. And that is my, besides pawns, which I can take 3 different pawns here. I can take that one. Oh, I can take this pawn, and I can take that pawn. So those are my captures. I think we already determined that taking the rook on f8 is a bad idea because they would just capture back with their rook. I don't think it makes sense to take any of these pawns. Although in a game, I might consider taking their c pawn because that would prevent them from taking my c pawn. But then they would just take my b pawn, probably. But then I could take their d pawn, and then they would take my a pawn, and then I would take this one with check. It's probably not that, and it's probably not the 3 checks that I mentioned. What else is it? There's a threat. If I put my knight on g5, I'm threatening mate. What can they play? Knight to g5 is not a check, so it's not forcing. That allows my opponent to take a pawn. It also allows them to put a rook here, protected by the other rook, which would be guarding that square and preventing my queen from seeing that square. But then I could just take the rook with my knight, which is a check. But if they don't block with the rook, like if they just take this pawn, then I have mate. I think it's knight to g5. We're about to find out. Oh, it was. And now I think I should take that with check. Oh, and they gave me the other rook. That was nice. Thank you. No theme listed. And I can't add one because that feature is missing. Well, I haven't watched the video yet, but I'm pretty sure when I say those things, it makes me look like a jerk. And if so, I apologize. I'm not a jerk at heart, but it does bug me when a site takes away something that you used to use. You know, there's 50 features on a website or 100 features, and you use 4 or 5 of them regularly, and then they take one of those away. It's frustrating. So forgive me for being a little frustrated about that. Next puzzle. Okay, we are even on material. I'm not currently in check. My rook is under attack, and I am playing with the white pieces. Okay, I do have checks. I have 1, 2 checks. I think that's it. Oh no, I have this check, but I'm pretty sure that loses the rook. But let's just look at all the checks. That's my only check with the knight. It is a fork, but again, I think they would just take the rook, and then they would take my knight, and they would have a rook left. The check with the rook, I think they would take, and I don't have a follow-up. This check with the rook, I think they would take, and I don't have a follow-up. So what I think is I should just take the bishop, which we're moving on to captures now. That's pretty much my only capture since the checks don't work out. I assume they would take back, and I don't know if that's their best move, but then I would check with my knight, and I would win the rook, and I would have a knight left, which I would probably have to go put in front of this pawn since it is a passed pawn. I don't know if that's right, but I'm going to take the bishop. Okay, it was, and then it's this, and then taking the rook. Okay, good for me. Oh, and 13 points. Now I'm only 12 points away. All right, that puzzle has a 73% pass rate, but it's rated 1725. It doesn't have that many attempts. I'm guessing if the pass rate stays that high, then the rating will come down a little bit, or it should. If that's not the way it works, that should be the way it works. If everybody can pass that, you know, if everybody or 3/4 of people can solve this puzzle, it probably shouldn't be rated very high. Enough pontificating. Next puzzle. Okay. Oh, I'm playing with the black pieces. All right. Well, they've come toward my knight because, okay, they were in check. My knight is defended. So is this checkmate? No, because they can just move over one. But then I would take the knight. Is that all it is? I do have other checks. Oh, I could just take the knight now. Well, let me think about that. What's the downside of taking the knight now? I guess they could move their passed pawn. Let's see. If I take the knight now, I mean, they could check me, but then I would take their rook. Oh, no, they're about to promote with check. Okay, that seems like something that I need to know about. So back to checks. Was that my only check? No, I have a check here, but I said they would take that with the knight. Okay, so rook to g2 check. They can't get out of check any of those ways because of the knight and the rook. The knight would be protecting the rook. They would have to go to f3, where I would then check with the pawn, which would force them out further. Is that right? I don't know. I can't follow it out that far, but that's got to be it, right? Because the rook is still defended, the knight is still defended. If I check again with the rook, they take it, and I can't check with the knight now, so I think I take the knight. But then, what stops them from promoting once they get out of check? What else do I have? That's why I have to keep checking. That's my only check now. Okay. Yeah, I figured it would keep going. Oh, okay. No, never mind. When I said, oh, okay, that's because I thought I saw something, but I didn't. I thought I saw that I had this check, and then I would win the pawn, but the pawn's not there, and also the pawn's protected. Wow. Somebody wake me up here. I do have this check, though. Oh, and that's mate. That's what I didn't see earlier, is the king can't come back because the pawn guarding f3 if I just put the rook here in my other pawns guarding that square. Oh, wow. 7 more points to go. I'm over my time, but I'm gonna, take time away from some other activity in my day and try to break 1600 here. Yeah, that's the two things that I missed is that this pawn is keeping the king from coming this way, and my G pawn is keeping the king from going back. Oh, let's do another one. Well, I do have a check, 2 checks. The first one I saw is rook to D8, but that allows the king to come toward me. Then I could check on C8, protected by my light squared bishop, and that forces the king out one of 2 ways. So I don't know if that accomplishes anything, but what about checking here? I think it has to be the bishop check first. Bishop to E5 check, because the king can't come over, and they can't block that check, so it would have to go back, and then the rook check on D8 is mate. Pretty sure. Yeah, that forced them back, so that's mate. Okay, yeah, it should say mate in 2 here, but it does not. Oh, and I broke 1600. Wow. All right, well, somebody let me know if it's just me that's missing the ability to add themes or thumbs up or thumbs down the themes, or if that happened to everybody, because that is still bothering me because I'm only one person, so I don't know if it's affecting everyone that way. I just know it's affecting me that way, and it bothers me a little bit. Clearly, it bothered me because I kept mentioning it. I'll get over it eventually. I'm just curious. But thank you either way for spending your time here. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.